morning, everyone, and welcome back to the third main content day, the fourth day of the LS6 World Congress and our capital deployment and commercialization strategy focus. We've got a packed schedule of content again today in the Biotech Leaders track, covering a number of areas that I think, we've got some really exciting things coming up that you can see on the agenda underneath this session, from female founders to best practice for entering the US market, synchronizing your commercial and clinical strategy, and closing off later on after a number of other presentations on our challenges and technology solutions for dual eligible populations in the US from the former CMO of the US Medicaid program. But kicking us off this morning with our sort of regulatory focus, I suppose, I'm delighted to be joined by two members of the SME Office from the European Medicines Agency. The format for this morning is we have a presentation to kick us off and outline how the EMA is supporting SMEs and innovation in Europe and beyond. And then we'll have a sort of live Q&A session with Helene and Constantinos after the presentation. So as you have been, it's been super active over the last few days. Please do keep the format for this morning is we have a presentation to kick Q&A sections and chat functions on the right-hand side of your screen there. We'll get to as many as we can throughout the time that we have this morning. So please do keep them coming in as soon as you have one, be that through the presentation or indeed as we're going through the Q&A section, please do keep them coming. But delighted now to hand over to Helene from the EMA to guide us through the presentation. Helene, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning, everyone. So the purpose of today's presentation is to help you understand the support that is available at EMA for SMEs and innovation. I'll be joined by Constantinos in the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So I would like to cover 4 points today. So the first one will be the EMA SME Office, so who we are and what we do. The second one will be the EMA support to innovation. Then I'll touch upon the EMA's role in the medical devices area before giving some take-home messages and conclude the presentation. So the SME Office. So in 2005 was adopted a regulation aiming at promoting innovation and development of new medicines by SMEs. This is why the EMA SME Office was launched 15 years ago now. What's interesting on this slide is that if you have a look at where the authorized medicine come from, usually, even if they are marketed later by large or intermediate-sized companies, they come originally from SMEs and academia. This is why it's important, if you want to support innovation, to support SMEs and academia. So the EMA SME Office is a dedicated contact point within the European Medicines Agency that provides assistance to SMEs, that facilitates communication with SMEs and within the agency, and that also engage with EU bodies and industry stakeholders on SME matters. We have different types of activities, and I'm going to explain to you in the next few slides what they are. We assign the SME status, we provide assistance to SMEs. There are some fee incentives for SMEs for EMA procedures. We provide translation assistance at the time of marketing authorization, training, partnering, and networking opportunities. So let's start with the registration as an SME with EMA. So to benefit from the EMA support for SME, you need to come and apply for the SME status. So this is the first step. You submit an application to us. We review your application. And if we think you're an SME, then we qualify your company. You get an EMA SME number that you will use for EMA procedures, and the SME status is renewed every 2 years. To decide if a company is an SME, we apply the EU SME definition that is laid down in a Commission recommendation. So there are some SME thresholds that have to be met. And we take into account the size of the company, but also the ownership structure of the company. So an SME is a company that has less than 250 employees and an annual turnover of not more than 50 million euros or a balance sheet total of not more than 43 million euros. At the end of the process, the company is classified in micro, small, or medium-sized enterprise. And it's important because depending on the size, the incentives can change. And we also classify the company in terms of ownership structure, so autonomous, partner, or linked enterprise. So in terms of volume, we have a bit less. We had end of 2020, a bit less than 2,000 companies registered with us. And in terms of profile, even though we support SMEs working on the veterinary and human fields, there are many of them that are declared working in the human field. We also have almost half of them that are micro-sized. So that means they have less than 10 employees and autonomous. A bit more than 9% are academic spin-offs and 12% of them were created over the last 2 years. So they are quite new. In terms of pipeline, we have many of them working on therapeutics and many of them, half of them working on chemical entities. But we also have companies working on biologicals, advanced therapy medicinal products. We have many of SMEs working on rare diseases and orphan medicines, pediatric medicines, and we also have some companies working in generic area. In terms of the geographical distribution, in end of 2020, we had 13% of companies based in Germany, 9% in the UK, then it was France, Ireland, and the Netherlands, if based in the EU. And we also have non-EU EEA company that are registered with us. In that case, they're coming through a regulatory consultancy. Of course, because of Brexit, so now the UK company have either set up a subsidiary in the EU or they are coming through a regulatory consultancy. These are the figures at end 2020, so the UK was still part of the EU. So in terms of ownership, the majority of companies are privately owned by individuals or private corporations. And the funding by venture capital companies and other private investments have kept quite stable over the years. So let's talk now about the regulatory assistance to SMEs. So it's one of the big incentives of being registered with us. So at the SME office, we have an email, so sme@ema.europa.eu. So it's a dedicated inbox where you can send any questions you have. And we also have a helpline that you can call and you can raise any question you might want to be addressed. We reply either directly or we can interact with other people from the EMA if we need their input. And if your question is complex, is on the development of a product, and if we need to involve many people from the EMA, in that case, we set up a meeting that we call an SME briefing meeting, and I'm going to explain to you in the next slide what it is. I've listed on this slide some example of topics addressed. So we have many questions on the SME definition and incentives. We also have many questions on how and when to apply for scientific advice or protocol assistance. We have many questions on how and when to apply for prime designation, orphan designation, some questions on criteria for orphan designation, for example, various questions on regulatory topics like the eligibility to the centralized procedure or the legal basis for the submission of a marketing authorization, and some questions also on pediatric requirements. So let's talk now about the SME briefing meetings I was mentioning before. So it's a meeting that is set up by the EMA with the company. It's a multidisciplinary group from the EMA, so people coming from different departments that join the meeting. And it's a platform for really an early and informal dialogue with SMEs. And we discussed the regulatory strategy of a medicinal product development. So the aim is to go through the range of procedures and incentives that are available and try to plan the medicinal product development. It's free of charge, and it can be asked at an early point of the development, but also later during the development of the product. You can come for a first meeting and then come for a follow-up briefing meeting later on. Topics covered, so I've listed most of them, but they are a bit the same as the ones that are being addressed in the regulatory assistance. So mainly company come from for questions on scientific advice, regulatory strategy, orphan aspects and the orphan drug designation, pediatric requirements, and we have many questions on prime eligibility, and we can also organize meetings to do kind of a pre-check of the prime eligibility. In terms of therapeutic indications, we have many oncology products and orphan products. So as I said, majority of companies come at early stage, but and it's recommended to come as early as possible, but you can also come later during the development. So the fee incentives for SMEs. So it's also an incentive for companies that are registered with us. The EMA procedures usually have a fee, and when you are an SME, then you get reduction or exemptions for the fee. So this slide summarizes the main fee incentives. The first one that I wanted to highlight to you today is the scientific advice. So if you're an SME, you get 90% fee reduction of the scientific advice fee. And if you're an SME and you're coming for an orphan designated product, then in that case, it's for free. So you don't have to pay anything to come and ask for scientific advice. Another interesting thing is for the marketing authorization application. When you are an SME, you don't have to pay the fee when your dossier is validated, but after the decision of the commission, so at the end of the process. And if you're an SME and during the development of your product, you have received scientific advice and you can show that you have followed the scientific advice and that unfortunately the marketing authorization application is unsuccessful, so you have a negative outcome, in that case, you can apply for what we call a conditional fee exemption, which means that you won't have to pay anything. And something that I also wanted to highlight here is that if you are an SME and you come for an orphan designated product, then the marketing authorization application is for free. Then we have other incentives for post-authorization procedures, inspection, pre and post-authorization, MEDRA registration, and pharmacovigilance that are summarized on these slides. I've also put the link on the slide to the full detail on fee incentives that is on the EMA website. So apart from the regulatory assistance and the fee incentives, we also provide other kind of support. So one of the support that is of interest for you too is the training that we provide and the fact that we raise awareness on what's happening on the regulatory world. So in terms of training and awareness, we organize info days on specific topics that are of interest for SMEs. We also write the SME newsletter, which is a newsletter that we publish 3 or 4 times a year, and that highlights the main news items that can have an impact on your business. Then mailing and announcements, so targeted mailings, for example, if there's public consultation on a guidance and we want to raise awareness on that, we would circulate a mailing. And then we also have the SME user guide, which is a document that summarizes the procedures in pre and post-authorization, but also during the marketing authorization application. We also engage with EU bodies and industry stakeholders. We have set up a few years ago the SME register, that is a public register listing all companies that are registered with us. It's available on the EMA website. So it increased the visibility on the companies registered with us. And we also participate to conferences and events like today to raise awareness on the SME initiative and the SME office and what we can provide to SMEs. The translation assistance, so it's a bit specific, but it's for companies that are at the stage of marketing authorization application. So they are going to be successful, they're going to have a positive opinion. And when you get the positive opinion, you need to provide the product information in all EU languages. So it's a lot of work for companies, a lot of time and money. And when you are an SME, you can benefit from this translation assistance. So that means that the EMA will organize with the translation center for the bodies of the EU, the translation, and will provide it to you free of charge. So let's talk now about the support to innovation. So this slide summarizes the tools that are available throughout the development of a product until the marketing authorization application and the different possibilities to interact with the EMA. So on this slide, you can see the dedicated entry point, the SME office, so that's us. But there's also a dedicated entry point for academia. I've also highlighted here that it's important to have a look at the website because we have a lot of procedural and scientific guidance available. The assessment report of authorized products can also be a useful source of information. You have the orphan drug designation step that I'm not going to detail in the next few slides, but that is important for a product that is for a rare disease. So if you think your product is meeting the criteria, then you should definitely apply for orphan drug designation because this will bring incentives for your product and extra supports. In the next few slides, I'm going to talk about the Innovation Task Force, scientific advice, protocol assistance, the PRIME scheme, and the ATMP certification. I also wanted to highlight here the possibility to interact with the health technology assessment for aspects related to market access and the pre-submission meeting when you're about to submit a marketing authorization application where you can liaise with the EMA and ask the questions. So the Innovation Task Force, is a multidisciplinary group that we have within the EMA, and we work across the EMA, but also in cooperation with the EU network and EMA's working parties. We bring together scientific, regulatory, and legal competencies on innovative topics, and it's a forum for early dialogue with applicants on any innovative aspects of a product development. So for example, emerging therapies, novel technologies, and borderline products. It's really early in the development of your product. You can contact the ITF to discuss innovation aspects. So in 2020, we had 20% of the ITF briefing meetings being held for SMEs. So it's a tool that is used by SMEs quite a lot. I also wanted to mention to you, highlight today the EU Innovation Network. So the national competent authorities and national innovation offices used to be involved and are involved in the Innovation Task Force. But in 2015, it was decided to strengthen the cooperation between the innovation offices and the EMA. And that's why the EU Innovation Network was set up. So the aim of this network is to try to make the regulatory support that is available at the European and at national level visible to developers, so for them to know what's happening and what they can benefit from. So the scientific advice and a protocol assistance is also something very interesting and important when you're developing a product. So protocol assistance is for designated orphan medicinal products. So it's scientific advice for orphan products. Scientific advice can be provided on any scientific question. So quality, non-clinical, and clinical. You can have scientific advice on quality and clinical, or you can mix the questions on these areas. It can be provided at any time point of the development. So it's recommended to come early in the development of your product, but you can also come at any time, and you can come for a follow-up scientific advice if new questions arises during the development of your product. You can also receive advice on eligibility of, for example, your development for a conditional approval, then at the stage of marketing authorization, or approval under exceptional circumstances. You can also decide to go for a parallel consultation where the EMA is going to be involved together with HTA bodies, so you can also address market access aspects. You can also decide to go for parallel scientific advice. So it's scientific advice with EMA and FDA to allow you to think about your development globally. And then there's also the qualification of biomarkers and other novel methodologies. That is a tool of interest when you're developing methods and tools for use in pharmaceutical R&D, for example. So to use the scientific advice, maximize really the chances of success at the time of marketing authorization. And it's important to think about it when you're developing a product. So in terms of figures, I just wanted here to highlight to you that in terms of scientific advice in 2020, 22% of the total procedures were done for SMEs, and 39% of the protocol assistance, so for orphan products, were for SMEs in 2020. So you see, we have a lot of SMEs working in the orphan area. In terms of qualification of novel methodologies, in 2020, half of them were for SMEs. So it's also something that's used by SMEs. So we wanted to highlight this to you today is in this context of a pandemic. The EMA has set up a rapid scientific advice for COVID-19 treatments or vaccines. So it's something that is free of charge completely, and there is no predefined submission deadline, because for a normal scientific advice procedure, you would have to respect submission deadlines, but in that case, you come whenever you're ready. There's a reduced review time to 20 days compared to 40 to 70 days for a normal scientific advice procedure. There's also a high flexibility on the type and extent of the briefing dossier, so on the data that you're going to provide. And in any case, we advise developers to contact the EMA as soon as possible to discuss the strategy and the development of this kind of product. So there's a lot of guidance on the EMA website. Also, it's worth mentioning that the EMA has this COVID-19 pandemic task force that is also available to provide early guidance to developers, and also for those who are not yet ready for a formal rapid scientific advice. So let's talk now about the PRIME scheme. So the PRIME scheme is the priority medicine scheme that has been launched in 2016, so 4 years ago now. So this is a scheme that has been set up for new human medicines with major public health interest. And the aim of it is to foster the development of new medicines and facilitate their access to patients. So you have to apply for the PRIME scheme, and for SMEs in academia, you can enter earlier into the scheme, so at the proof of principle stage. So this is an incentive also to be an SME, is to be able to benefit from the PRIME scheme earlier in the development. So the PRIME scheme is an early and enhanced support, and that uses the tools that are already available at EMA level. But when you get the prime designation, then you have a kickoff meeting with multidisciplinary expertise from the EU network and from the EMA. The CHMP rapporteur, that is the one that is going to be the rapporteur then for the marketing authorization, is appointed earlier during the development. You get scientific advice at key development milestones. So you decide on the strategy and when to have the scientific advice, and they are also for free. And you get an early confirmation of the potential of your product to be assessed through the accelerated assessment timelines then at the time of marketing authorization. So these are the data up to December 2020 for the prime scheme since the launch. There's been a high interest since the beginning. SMEs have been very interesting in that. Almost 45% of the products in the prime scheme are from SMEs. There are few SMEs that entered early into the prime scheme. There's a lower success rate for SME applications for prime because sometimes they are not mature enough. And many products are for orphan disease and ATMPs. In terms of therapeutic areas, you have oncology, hematology that are really an important indication here. Then gynecology, endocrinology, neurology, infectious diseases, and vaccines. So the ATMP certification. The ATMP certification is a specific incentive for SMEs. So if you're an SME, you can come to the EMA and ask to certify your data on quality and non-clinical for ATMPs. So you can come at any time of the development of your product. And really the aim of this certification procedure is to identify early on the potential issues that your product already has and address them before submitting the marketing authorization application. So it can maximize the chance of success later on, and it can also be used when you apply for clinical trial application to help with the evaluation. So I wanted also today to briefly touch upon the EMA's role in the medical device area. So there are two new regulations that have been adopted in 2017 and that bring changes to the EU legal framework for the medical devices. So one of the main change is that there's a different definition, a larger definition of medical device, stricter requirements and oversight of the notified bodies. There are new processes for clinical investigations, vigilance, post-market surveillance, new requirements for transparency and traceability, and there's an harmonization of the efforts between the member states, and also there's new role and responsibilities for EMA and NCAs. So the regulation on medical device, so MDR, is going to apply in May 2021, and the regulation on in vitro diagnostic medical devices from May 2022. There was a transition period of few years. So what's going to be the role of the EMA in this new setting? So the EMA will be consulted by the European Commission on borderline products. The EMA will also be consulted, so notified body will ask for scientific opinions for medical devices composed of substances or combination of substances that are absorbed by or locally dispersed in the human body, for companion diagnostics and medical devices incorporating ancillary medicinal products. Also, there is another requirement that has been brought by this new regulation, is that the marketing authorization application for integral device need to contain a declaration of conformity, a C certificate, or the notified body opinion. So this is something that is new. So you can follow the implementation of this new regulation on the EMA website. There is a dedicated web page that is being kept up to date. And then last point on the medical devices, just wanted to highlight here that there was a communication from the European Commission on the European Health Union package, and the extension of EMA's mandate is part of it. So it's being discussed at the moment, but one of the new tasks for EMA in the area of medical devices is going to be the monitoring and mitigating shortages of critical medical devices, and also support with expert panels. So this is something that's coming up. So just to conclude here, and then after we can address your questions, just to summarize. So if you're developing a product, then look for guidance on the EMA website. Look at the assessment report, as I said, of authorized products. You can understand how product has been developed in the regulatory aspects, scientific aspects, etc. Bear in mind that there is specific support if you are an SME, and that you can apply and benefit from SME incentives. And also, last but not least, this is something that we say all the time, is to come early and come often and really take advantage of all the opportunities to interact with EMA, to start a discussion, because this will help you to maximize your chances of success then at the time of marketing authorization. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helene. If I could maybe ask you to stop sharing your screen now, and then we can also bring Constantinos for the Q&A section here. So yeah, thank you very much for that. There was loads of great information in there. We have a number of questions. I have some of my own, but I guess one that is sort of top of the inbox here, and comes very much off the last comment you made there about coming early to the EMA. Mel Walker's asked, when you say you prefer companies to come early, what is the ideal timing from your perspective? So when should companies start planning for scientific advice from the EMA?
So for scientific advice, I mean, depending on the questions, actually, because scientific advice is prospective by nature. So you have to come for scientific advice, having in mind the questions you want to raise. So you can't come, for example, and giving your data and leave them, to say what they think about it. You need to have in mind the questions you want to raise. And so whenever you're ready and whenever there are questions on the development of your product, if it's on clinical, non-clinical, or quality, then you can contact the EMA and start discussing. But you really need to have first, to do first the work, to have data and to have questions that they are going to address later on, and that will help you to build your development for your products. So, and you can come several times, and you can combine clinical, non-clinical, quality questions. Yes, I hope this answers your question.
Fantastic, thanks. Yeah, and I guess a question, or one of mine, given the audience that we have for the World Congress this year, obviously we do have a lot of European SMEs, but also companies from North America and from Asia as well who have been joining us this week. So can a company who's based outside of the EU benefit from the EMA's support to the SMEs that you've just sort of outlined there?
Yes, you can come to the EMA and benefit from the support to SMEs. So you have to set up a subsidiary in the EU or come through a regulatory consultancy that is based in the EU and that is registered as an SME with us. So you don't have to have your companies based in the EU to benefit from the support. And it has been done because many, for example, US companies want then later to come on the European market, and they would need this support, and so they can benefit from it coming through a regulatory consultancy.
Perfect. I guess a slightly more specific question that came through from Jonathan Butcher earlier, and it's about antimicrobial resistance. He says this is obviously a growing pandemic, very few solutions in development to tackle highly resistant infections. Are there any lessons that the EMA are taking from the COVID pandemic that can apply to support for SMEs who are currently the main drug developers in this sector, to incentivize and simplify AMR drug development so they're better equipped for new AMR medicines in Europe? I don't know if
yeah, I can take that, maybe that question. It's quite an important topic. So the AMR and the whole EMR topic, it's a multifaceted topic that needs to be addressed from different aspects. So not only focusing on the medicinal product development support, but also there's the whole separate areas of relating to animal health, food, and so on. So if we focus on the support to medicinal product development, so you can see already that things are being transformed by the current crisis. So Helene highlighted the fast track scientific advice for COVID therapies and vaccines, which is quite an impressive change for a regulator to issue an advice in about 20 days, because the usual timelines we have is about 2 months. So we're definitely there are lessons to be learned from the current support that we offer to developers and take them forward. And maybe we can share later on with I think the person, I can't see the name of the person who raised the topic, some links to some big changes that are happening at the EU level in relation to health. So that was highlighted in the presentation from Helene, but quite shortly, and it's the EU health package. So there's a lot of measures and big initiatives trying to shift the health agenda at the European level. So one of the package is what is called the pharma strategy. So the pharmaceutical strategy for Europe, and in that package, there is a plan to address or to work on addressing unmet medical needs. And in that category, there is emphasis given to antimicrobials being given a priority. So there's a mixture there of policy initiatives, driven by legislation at the European level, but also more, I would say, implementing or non-legislative tools that are planned. So, but things are definitely going to move, in that space. So we need to follow up and really get the SMEs that are developing or that are working in the space of AMR to get them involved, because our experience that we don't see a lot of first companies working in AMR and antimicrobials, and those that do, then they don't use sufficiently the tools that we have in order to support them during the development. So that's a bit the idea. So if you do have, so this is a message maybe to attendees, if you're working on antimicrobials, vaccines, in AMR, please get in touch with us, because there's probably a need, not only for you, but for us to be exposed to what you do, so that we are better tailoring the different platforms that we have in order to support your developments.
Yeah, perfect. So, yeah, that was from a Swiss biotech, Bioversus, Jonathan Butcher there, who had that question. So please do, keep any questions. Indeed, if you have any sort of specific questions that you have for Consta or for Helen, that you can maybe follow up through the platform, through the Q&A and chat functions here, or indeed through the platform one-to-one video partner meeting if you have any specific questions on anything. I guess before sort of moving on to, I guess, a couple of things that were mentioned there a little later on, a question from Mel, and indeed a bit of focus around sort of health tech and med tech areas that you mentioned briefly there, Helene. But I had a question about how do you sort of ensure, from the regulatory and market access perspective, how do you ensure value creation from that perspective?
Did you want to take it, Costa?
Yeah, I can take that question. So I know there's a lot of the term value creation is used a lot in throughout the conference, and the way really companies need to look at the regulators and the context they have with regulators is how to ensure that the data they're generating are of regulatory grade, and so are going to be useful not only for having a marketing authorization, so which is the role of EMA and national competent authorities, so in each member state, but also with the view to using this data for supporting market access in Europe. So in Europe, we have what we call the fourth hurdle, which comes after the marketing authorization, which is managed by each member state. And so in that, so as part of that process, there is an assessment of what we call HTA, so health technology assessment, which is providing, making an assessment on a comparative efficacy versus other products. So, of course, if you have that data and that evidence built into your confirmatory program for the marketing authorization, then that's a bonus, that's a plus. And there is a procedure which has been put in place at EMA level, which is called the parallel consultation. And so that process allows companies to discuss a development program with the view to make sure that the data is of sufficient quality, so fit for purpose for an authorization, but also for health technology assessment bodies. And so that's quite I would say you do two processes in one, in a way, and you ensure that the design of your program will generate the data that will be acceptable by different bodies along the approval process. So that is so that's a way to look at the interaction during development with regulators. I saw a comment on the fee incentives, whether HTA bodies have fee incentives for SMEs. So from our experience, so only some HTA bodies are charging fees. So, and this varies, so I can't give you an exact as to, which body charges or not fees. And some HTA bodies also have fee reductions for SMEs, but they are not aligned with those of EMA. From what I remember at the time when we were developing the policy, we tried to push to have an alignment on incentives. So at EMA level, it's 90% on the fee for scientific advice. So to give you an idea, it's a scientific advice fee is about 80,000 euros. So you apply 90% fee reduction on that, which is a big incentive for small companies to to come into the system and seek advice. But at the HTA level, the fee, from what I remember, was about 65 for some authorities.
Yeah, well, obviously you've seen some of the questions there. That was actually going to be my follow-up one from Mel there on the HTAs and EMA advice. Another question that came through was around what you mentioned, Helene, about the info days. It said you mentioned sort of training and awareness days on topics relevant to SMEs during the presentation. Could you maybe share a little bit more on the sort of topics that these actually focus on, who they're sort of targeted towards? Is it for CEOs? Is it for regulatory heads or market access heads? And indeed, if they're still ongoing while everyone's in these lockdowns, are they being done virtually, or are they going to be coming back at some point physically?
Yes, so yes, unfortunately, because of the move of the EMA from London to Amsterdam, then because of the pandemic, it's true we didn't have any physical info day since 2018, I think. So, so the topics really depend on the interest and on the news, and we sometimes decide to organize info day on, for example, all the regulatory tools in pre-authorization, so something a bit more general to explain, a bit like what I've explained on my slide, mentioning the steps before the submission of a marketing authorization. But we also had training dedicated for veterinary companies, etc. This year, what we are organizing with colleagues with EMA, it's going to be held end of February, beginning of March. We are going to do a training on the CTIS. So it's the portal for clinical trials. So it's a training organized by colleagues from the EMA, but it's going to be dedicated to SMEs and academia, and it's going to be virtual. So yes, we have a couple of ideas for the next info days, but usually we try to have 1 or 2 per year. And we are also open to ideas. So if SMEs, for example, raise the importance of being trained on one topic, we listen to them, and we try to organize something if it's something that comes up often. So yes, we've lost, yeah. So next one is on the CTIS.
Fantastic. I've realised that we're almost to our next session here. I guess I did have one last question. I think I was going to ask some things around what you were mentioning on the med devices, but if you actually go to later on today in the MedTech Leaders track at 12 o'clock, we do have more of a deep dive on the MDR regulation from our partners at NDA Group. So I maybe recommend anyone who's interested in that topic particularly to join that session. But I guess, yeah, as we only have a couple of minutes left now, I guess my final question that I plan to ask really was, and maybe also sort of roll in any final thoughts that either of you have, which development support landing zone should a company consider when approaching the EMA?
I think it's really to bear in mind the slide with the different contact points. There are many opportunities to interact with the EMA, either formally or informally, and you have teams, well, a team like us dedicated to SME, to academia, etc. The EMA, even though we are, a regulatory agency, we are very open to discussions, and companies that develop products should really not hesitate to contact us and really take the most of all the tools and the platform for interactions that are available. So in terms of landing zones, yes, you have many in the development of your product, and really this slide summarizes the main landing zones for pre-authorization aspects.
Fantastic. And any final thoughts from you, Consta, before we need to wrap up?
Just to encourage so companies to get in touch with us, and I mean, it can be informally at the beginning, can be a simple email or a call, but sometimes it's nice to to start the conversation, and I'll have to see which platform is the most appropriate depending on the stage of development of be it a company or an asset. So we have early platforms like the Innovation Task Force. We have more formal ones, which is the scientific advice. But also one point to highlight, because there's a strong emphasis on medtech, is that we have that type of scientific advice which is called qualification on novel methodologies, which is a bit, I would say, a generic term, but this is a procedure which allows companies to qualify a method which is used in the development of a product. So to give you an idea, for example, it is about a qualification of a wearable device in order to track the mobility in a rare disease, which is Duchenne. So it's quite interesting to actually look at these documents that are public documents, so they're available on the EMA website, to give you and it gives an idea of what type of discussion is taking place in that space. So all the devices, the apps, and linking the tech with the clinical development and the regulatory grade evidence. So it's quite interesting to have a look at that, and I'm sure that a lot of companies working in medtech will be interested to look at what support measures are available. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I guess we're even over time. That kind of flew. There's so much great information in there. That the session will be now immediately available on demand. If you were, logging in late or perhaps watching from the US or at a later date, all of this is immediately available. So please do, review it. There's so many great links and information in the presentation. So please do use those. And if you have any questions for the EMA and through the various different departments and bodies, please do reach out to them. I hope you found this session useful. I really appreciate Helene and Consta joining us when no doubt it's an extremely busy time for the EMA with everything going on. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you on our next session. If I knew then what I know now about best practice for entering the US market. So see you shortly.